we realize and start to face the horrible truth that everything we've been told is a lie. Today, I'm no longer surprised, and I truly believe that every facet of our reality has been affected, manipulated, infiltrated, and poisoned with half-truths. It's not always completely a lie, but the best way to tell a lie is you keep a little bit of the truth and then you're surrounded by a lot of falsifications. Everything in creation spins and vibrates. Everything has its own prime resonance frequency. Everything. And this is why once we can identify a prime resonance frequency of a bacterium or an atom or whatever it is, or a soccer field, we can then manipulate that object with its prime resonance frequency. In Christianity, it's the word. Hinduism, it's Om. The Egyptians believe the universe was sung into creation, and the original people of Australia, not the Aboriginal, so it's the original people of Australia, believe that the world was created with 3 sacred songs. And then we have the phenomenal similarities between the 6 days of creation in Christianity and the word that created everything, the 6 aspects of Om, and the 6 aspects of the all-seeing eye of Horus, and you start seeing the connections between all these ancient cultures and the creation stories. Sound is the source of all creation. Sound and resonance is responsible for everything. By now you should know that sound manifests physical form, and this is the most basic example. I just cannot get enough of it. I can watch it millions of times. Every frequency has its own specific shape, a prime resonance frequency. Now you're only looking at a 2-dimensional representation of a 3-dimensional effect. I think he actually uses rice on a metal plate here. So the original people of Australia have a creation story that says time began when the supernatural beings awoke and broke through the surface of the earth. So imagine the surface of the earth being something like this, that metal plate being the surface of the earth, and the supernatural beings broke through the surface of the earth, and they created the surface of the earth with 3 sacred songs. This is from Hans Jenny's brilliant video, Cymatics. This is powder on a metal plate. It's not a liquid or a jelly, it's powder. You can see landscapes being formed here over extended periods of time. Mountains can form, valleys, volcanoes, all to do with the sound of the earth coming out of the earth. Now watch that. And some of these pictures, the images of this CymaScope images tell us that it was these sounds, the images of the sound, that actually inspired religious symbols. That beautiful cross in a circle at the center of some of these cymatic photographs give us a very clear indication that the creators of the religious symbols knew exactly what they were talking about, that the source of creation is sound itself. And that takes us to what sound does. Sound pretty much does everything you can imagine because it's the source of creation. And this brings us to using sound as a tool in technology. Sound creates light. It's very obvious. We know that God said, let there be light, and you can do this yourself by attaching a speaker to an LED light and see what happens. Royal Raymond Rife, you should know by now, that with the man that found the cure for all disease with sound and resonance. It were converted to electric impulses, and sound continues to amaze us. Sound can levitate. By now, you would have seen this many times. Just a very quick idea that sound actually does levitate things, but this is not how the ancients used to levitate the very big, heavy objects. This is a very different technique used here. This is just pressure waves that can levitate things, very light objects, but it does give you the ability to imagine that sound actually levitates. Sound creates hurricanes. There are 2 guys in 2003 that lodged a patent to create hurricanes out of sound, believe it or not. And I believe they were granted their patent to create hurricanes. And maybe this is how they create the weather for us, without us even realizing it. And this is where we start getting into the real understanding of some of the masters. And no matter how I look at it, how much research I do, I keep coming back to one guy that stands head and shoulders above all other researchers and inventors of, I don't know, for how many centuries. And that guy's name is NIKOLA Tesla. He says, if you want to find out the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. That's exactly what I've been sharing with you here. Everything is sound and magnetism, and this is really important. So what most people don't know is, remember, sound, God said, let there be light. So it's sound, moving sound. Sound manifests as toroidal fields. Those moving toroidal fields create magnetic fields, which are toroidal fields as well. And moving magnetic fields create electricity. That's the sequence of events. But this tells us that because sound creates magnetic fields, it means everything must have a must be magnetic in some sort, and in some sort of way. And if it's not, there's a very specific reason why it's not magnetic. So here's an example.
You might not think of water as being magnetic, but it is. And so are graphite, aluminum, and glass. Aluminum is a good example of a paramagnet. And so is oxygen, which is attracted to magnets. Here, I have a few milliliters of liquid oxygen, which sticks to the magnet. I'll explain why later. Gadolinium oxide and cupric sulfate are good examples of paramagnetic substances. Cupric sulfate is a salt that can be picked up by a magnet.
And no matter how I look at it, how much research I do, I keep coming back to one guy that stands head and shoulders above all other researchers and inventors of, I don't know, for how many centuries. And that guy's name is Nikola Tesla. He says, if you want to find out the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. That's exactly what I've been sharing with you here. Here's a picture of an electron. There's a picture taken about a decade ago. They tell us that this is a light beam, or electron riding a light beam. Can you see a particle anywhere in this picture? No, there's no particle. They're resonant waves, and yet they tell us it's an electron. Can you see how we get brainwashed? So this is what Nikola Tesla has to say about the electron from an interview in 1928. On the whole subject of matter, in fact, Dr. Tesla holds the view that are startlingly original. He disagrees with the concept of atomic theory of matter and does not believe in the existence of an electron as pictured by science. This is a shock to the system, because we all think electrons are real. And you start seeing an agenda being developed here, an agenda being developed by mainstream universities, the mainstream scientific fraternity, under the guidance of those that are trying to lie to us and make us believe things that are not so. This is what Einstein has to say about electrons. In the theoretical treatment of these electrons, we are faced with the difficulty that electrodynamic theory itself is unable to give an account of their nature. For since electrical masses constituting the electron would necessarily be scattered under the influence of their mutual repulsion unless there are forces of another kind operating between them, the nature of which has hitherto remained obscure to us. So he says he doesn't quite understand how electrons come into being. And he tells us that millions of people all over the world are being fooled by the non-existing electron, and he has a lot more to say about this. And you start seeing that scientists and inventors and researchers over the last 200 years have been vehemently opposed to this whole concept of an electron and the atomic structure that has been forced down our throats and through all our educational institutions, that we just take for granted and we accept because we believe the guys that teach us this to be smart and they're not lying to us. We just accept the stuff. So what are the stone circles all about? By now you can see that clearly we're dealing with cymatic patterns. Very obvious we're dealing with cymatic patterns. That's what every stone circle is. It's just a representation of the sound frequency that comes out of the earth at that specific point. That's what this is all about. And some of these cymatic, like sand on a metal plate, but now these are stones, right? Some of the structures are actually very distinct magnetrons. And of those flower shapes, every time you see a flower-shaped stone circle, it means they actually built an ancient giant magnetron like this. Magnetrons that can cut metal in a split second. And I asked two magnetron scientists, how much energy would a magnetron 40 meters in diameter generate? Remember that a tiny magnetron can create so much energy in a laser beam that cuts metal in a split second. I mean, it literally just melts the metal. And the answer was that a magnetron that size would create more energy than all the power plants on Earth together combined. We have thousands of these magnetrons in Southern Africa, thousands of them. So these guys are generating so much energy, it's insane. And we know this because we measured it. We measured the sound frequencies, the electromagnetic fields, the loudness in decibels. And it's just insane what's coming out of these stone circles. Adam's calendar is the most powerful of all these ancients of these stone circles. Adam's calendar is actually much, much more powerful. It's as if they all seem to be sending their frequencies to Adam's calendar, and that's like the collection point for all this, the energies created by all these millions of stone circles. That's what it seems like. So what we have at Adam's calendar is a very definite toroidal effect, and it's alive even today because we measured it. So when you look at ancient structures built out of stone, you realize that these guys knew exactly what they were doing. They understand that stone is the tool that carries with it, in it, information, storage capacity. It's an energy source, and that's why they used stone. Not because they were stupid, because they were very, very smart. We're the dumb ones, but we're catching up quite quickly. So what's very obvious now is that all these ancient structures, from the pyramids, Borobudur, etc., are all ancient machines. They were giant machines built out of stone, crystalline substance, to create or to perform specific functions. It's just the function that we haven't figured out. It's powered by the sound of the earth and activated by the movement of the sun. I mean, it's bloody brilliant. It's so simple. And now we're figuring this out, and we know that the energies are still there, because this is a photograph taken of the pyramids, and there's still huge energy coming out of the pyramids. Even the symmetrical patterns coming out of Stonehenge, although Stonehenge has been completely reconstructed, there's still very powerful symmetrical patterns coming out of Stonehenge that tells us that its original structure was very specifically created as a resonating device, an energy device. All this ancient stuff that we're dealing with, just like I said, these ancient machines are just advanced technology on a gigantic scale. These obelisks in Egypt, they ring like bells. If you listen to them, they ring like bells, just like those stones in my museum. And when you go into these temples in Egypt, you know, we were told that they were built for this and offering. It's all nonsense, offering and praying. It's just too many pillars, not enough space. When you look at them from this angle, you realize that this is just something very different. And all those pillars clustered together, why would they build them like that? And then the more I looked at it, the more I realized, now inspired by realizing that the stone circles were powerful energy generating devices, suddenly seeing aerial photographs of these temples in Egypt, I realized that they weren't temples, but they were actually templates. That we're actually looking at gigantic energy circuits, circuit boards on a gigantic scale that we could never have imagined. It's just beyond our imagination. The scale that these guys were building things on is something way out of our perception, because we just don't have enough money to do that. And macro processors, gigantic microprocessors become gigantic macro processors. You know, and here, we are told that these were places of worship, and then this is where the people lived. No, these are giant bloody macro processors, and that's part of the circuit board. You know, it's what it is. And you can start seeing that the pyramids were the same thing, giant powerhouses, creating huge amounts of energy. And just, you know, you start seeing things and recognizing how all this fits into ancient history. Sacsayhuaman is also just a giant circuit board. When you look at images from the air, you realize it's just a giant circuit board. It's not a fortress on top of a mountain to ward off marauding crowds and guys on horses and spears. No, it's a giant circuit board.
XRP EWT QNT, what Nikola Tesla tried to tell us, but they covered it up. We're going to start off with this first, and then we're going to circle back to it. So there's a huge event coming out called ITUPP, and I'll get really deep on why I feel as though that this is the smoking gun to regulations. While a lot of YouTubers, researchers, you name it, across the board point out April, because they feel as though it's clarity. And then, of course, we get other reports that, no, not going to happen. Going to kick the can down the road. Maybe be May, June, who knows. But what we do have that's solid, if you're willing to stick out the course of this video and learn some things, you will see, plain as day, this event called ITUPP. And it's called DOHA 2026. It's going to happen November 9th through the 27th in November of 2026 in Doha, Qatar. There's going to be so much emphasis on why this is solid. So, again, consider smashing that like. I'm going to present to you some things you're not aware of. Most are not aware of this. I can almost guarantee hardly anybody's reporting on it. And if they are, then awesome. Kudos to them. Well, let's establish a paper trail here of why you saw those intros. So for one, a lot of talk about harnessing energy, right? Well, shout out to Tokenizer. in roughly 2022, 2023, we did a live show and some recordings. And he pointed out that number 2 on his top 10 of his list was Energy Web Token. Now, it may have changed since then. But you see here, plain as day, from this write-up from an Energy Web Token, almost 6 years ago, not quite, how they and Ripple announced the world's first decarbonized blockchain. Now, please pump the brakes here. I know people get so bent out of shape on 3 main topics. If you mention anything about decarbonization or carbon credits or the World Economic Forum, it's just like there's always a few people like, oh, I'm out of here. Well, then for everybody else that wants to stay and listen and learn something, please continue, okay? So as we see here, Rocky Mountain Institute backed Energy Web launches EW0 provides technology solution applicable to all blockchains, okay? Now, it's important to understand where we go from here. But before we do, a disclaimer, do I own what Energy Web Token? No, I do not. I don't like the idea that there's only 30 million of these in circulation. I do like the idea there's a max supply, but again, I don't like the idea that you only have about roughly 39% in circulation. To me, it just means you're going to get continually dumped on. And what do we see this or here? You basically see that. You consistently see that. Even when back in 2021, you see here, they went up to $22.22. I'm willing to bet that the circulating supply was far, far, far less than what it is right now. These are the things people aren't telling you when it comes to projects. Join the Patreon. I get really deep into some of that, and I'm going to elaborate a little bit further about just looking at so many projects where if it's good, if it's bad, it can have the best use case in the world. But if the tokenomics don't make sense, it's not going to really matter, okay? And there are some exceptions. Maybe Energy Web Token is that, that exception. What I do want to jump into is understanding who they are, because in those intros, you saw a lot about basically harnessing energy, right? So Energy Web Token is a verified compute sovereign solution. And like it says here, it builds a decentralized digital trust layer for the energy transition, enabling enterprise-grade solutions for energy and sustainability markets, okay? On the 23rd, they reported this whole thing of this update, okay, of basically SAFC registry. And more importantly, we'll get into that in a bit, but they're not dead. They're alive. They had a recent AMA on the 19th, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm not going to play this because I don't want to make the whole emphasis on Energy Web Token, especially something I don't own. But what I do want to point out is the correlation of what really, really matters. And again, why we pointing out all this. So for one, check this out. Mentions electricity, all right? So many projects mention electricity, even Electronium. But you see here, enable secure open source data exchange and asset identity management to increase, like it says, liquidity, reliability, and security across electricity networks. Trusted by regulators and grid operators to drive market efficiency. When I think about the grid operators, again, I go back to kind of like what we saw in those brief intros, the whole concept of what Nikola Tesla was trying to accomplish many, many years ago. And if anything, even ancient technologies, we were taught a certain thing in our history books, right? I used to teach history myself, right? And it's the whole concept of we were sold a bill of goods, right? And we believe that that was basically truth. And now we're learning new things that, you know, for example, like even the pyramids and whatnot wasn't necessarily made to that elaborate scale just to please the royal family of the pharaohs or, you know, for the Egyptian gods and all this nonsense, right? If anything, they are literally these power grid generators and so on, right? Well, again, enter in Energy Web Token. Energy Web. We see here facilitating sustainable fuel usage in maritime. So I'm thinking to myself, when I think of maritime, obviously XTC stands out, but what about Energy Web Tokens bridged to things like Ripple with XRP? And that is also important to reference. So we see here supply chains through transparent registration and community involvement. We also see here basically their key ecosystem partners, all right? And the two that we're going to put focus on is, Shell and Deloitte. Going to put a lot of emphasis on those two, and you'll see why if you stick it out in the course of this. Shout out to our brother in space, Smoke. He points out Ripple identified as a key driver behind SEPA instant changes in Deloitte report. Depending on where you're from, you may call it SEPA, you may call it SEPA. And as you see here, as we blow this up, it is the key detailed information about this report. As we blow it up, the citation literally comes from www.deloitte.com for some people that want to get that reference for whatever reason. And we see here, SEPA instant credit transfer. You see over on the left side, what are the key drivers for SCT? And as we drop it down, there's a lot, right? But at the very bottom here, it says digitalization and technological advancement. I know it's kind of blurry, but I'm zooming in on a cell phone. The adoption of new technology has drastically transformed the payments landscape over the past few years. The emergence of virtual currencies like Bitcoin and Ripple with near real-time settlement. Getting more into this, again, you see on the bottom statistics across what? The SEPA zone, as you see right there. And if anything, why do we want to get into basically any of this? Well, there's a little bit more. So let's blow this up. It's Ripple, the handshake with SEPA, documented 4 times over according to Smoke. Now, I'm not going to zoom in anymore because it's really blurry as is, but I do appreciate the screenshots from Smoke, okay? And if anything, if you don't know who he is, you're brand new, give Smoke a follow. One of the world's best researchers. He can be followed over at SMQKEDQG on X. Atomic protocols. You have Ripple Interledger Protocol connecting to SEPA Instant Payments plus tips. And of course, you see here DZ Bank. What we also have here is it says basically several networks or clubs of financial institutions may ultimately form on top of Ripple's common settlement protocol. Gives examples of, for example, Nacha, the clearinghouse, and so on, right? Well, remember in the previous video, if you saw it, where it had Elon Musk in the intro, he mentioned that he felt as though that the automated clearinghouse is not safe, right? It doesn't have proper security. Well, that's all changed. And more importantly, you see here, basically, other than the mention that's not even here about things like Stronghold, which has Notch Connection, or Zabek has Notch Connection, we see here basically the member banks on the Ripple network, and the same can be true for SEPA region banks in Europe. And how's it all orchestrated? Well, you see quite a few things. Top right literally shows SEPA. Then, if anything, you have the automated clearinghouse. If anything, I'll blow this up a little bit more. Okay, so let's pull it up on the right. And then, of course, you have Bitcoin. Then, over here, it mentions the Ripple wallet. And it mentions the Gate Hub. Now, try to remember the whole thing that I'm literally sharing with you in regard to a Gate Hub. And you'll see why here in a little bit. The other area I want to take you to is this other particular screenshot. I think this one's big enough. We see here, basically speaking, the infrastructure. And in the screenshot, mentions specifically speaking, Ripple modernizes global payments infrastructure, global access, real-time, on-demand, no delays. Well, of course, on-demand with on-demand liquidity. This is SEPA. Shows it right there. Ripple, one simple API integration. Even shows automated clearinghouse. All right, a little bit more about this because we're going to tie in so many things. Hopefully you really appreciate this. Keep SEPA stuck in your head. Shout out to Jesse with his visual, this document. We see here, basically speaking, cross-border real-time gross settlements, 2020 to 2025. You see, for example, the Interledger Protocol. You see the CB and LP, which stands for, if you're wondering about that, correspondent banks and liquidity providers. And you see here, basically speaking, what? XRP Ledger for that global real-time gross settlement system. Then on the left, boom, you see what? Euro system, which does involve SEPA and Target 2. XRP Ledger with the Interledger Protocol connecting to that for those local payment systems and, of course, real-time gross settlement systems and the correspondent banking systems. That's major. Absolutely major. Because again, it's another visual establishing Ripple with XRP. And just in case you want the citation on that, you see here, basically, this is from Coffin AE Ventos.pt. Okay? Let's get into a little bit more about this on Deloitte. Smoke has another visual for us. He says, even Deloitte, a top financial consulting firm, created an app based on only Ripple and Stellar for cross-border payments. That's so important to reference that. And as we pull this up, why do we want to reference this? Well, because I recently learned this myself last time I collaborated with Smoke, or the one before that. Who's counting, right? It's the whole idea that Deloitte really specializes in audit. And when we get further into this, you'll see a little bit about Quant. Well, what does Quant have? Quant Authorize. And what does that specialize in? Audit. As we see here, points out this whole thing from reading the Global Payments Radar, says in this particular document, cross-border payments and blockchain, quick, cheap, data-rich, right? Immutable. Again, we'll get more into the Quant side about that. Frictionless. These are all terms that Quant brings up quite a bit. But on the far right, you see, plain as day, let me zoom in just a little bit more, where it says, specifically speaking, Deloitte has developed a proof of concept and accelerators to facilitate cross-border payments over blockchain platforms. Applicable use cases include business-to-business wholesale supplier payments, international remittances. Deloitte has partnered with existing blockchain platforms for enhanced integration such as Stellar and Ripple. Again, I didn't say it, it mentions it. On the bottom part area, we should highlight this as well, says the enablers. FX rate pathfinding, find the most optimal FX rate available on network from pre-selected providers. Who are those providers? Did we figure it already? No, we didn't. Boom, right here, Stellar and Ripple. Wonderful research, wonderful documents, no hype provided from Smoke, once again. Take you further into this, establishing more of a paper trail. And as we jump into it, it's establishing this right here. Remember how we mentioned Energy Web Token? Remember how we mentioned the whole thing as Shell? Well, this is from a channel called AI for Good, and they point out tracking renewable energy 24/7 with open source blockchain solutions, Shell perspectives. You're going to hear something that's really interesting from a particular lady from Energy Web Token talking to this guy about specifically what the link was Shell. Consider smashing that like, and if I still have to earn it, that's okay. Here we go.
When it comes to the link with Shell, Shell has been a long-standing partner for Energy Web since at the very beginning, basically. And we, as a core of our mission, we really depend on the power of crowd innovation, where Shell is taking a really active participation too. So, for example, for this specific project on renewable energy traceability, we used an already existing tool that we've been working before and cooperated with Shell to build on top and bring the solution into life.
Okay, let's pause and talk about that for a minute. She says, specifically speaking, what? We really depend on crowd innovation. This event, again, we're come full circle into it, hosted from the ITUPP, again, connected to ITU, is all about crowd innovation. Literally, you'll see why that's so important. But I need to still establish a few other things. I really need to do that. Taking more into this, let's jump back to the actual documentation from Energy Web documentation from docs.energyweb.org. What does the Energy Web 2025 upgrade entail? Now, I know we're in 2026, but this was a major upgrade for them. The 2025 upgrade marks Energy Web Platform's transition from legacy Energy Web Chain, which is EWC, a public but permission proof of authority network, to Energy Web X, the EWX, a public permissionless nominated proof of stake NPOS parachain on Polkadot. Why are you talking about Polkadot, Max? You'll see why. Because when I read some more about this, the upgraded Energy Web technology platform consists of, again, EWX, which is the core blockchain layer, providing NPOS on-chain governance, native token bridging, and EVM-compatible execution. But you have this thing called Verified Compute Cloud. And what's interesting there is it's a decentralized off-chain business logic computation service. I know it sounds all Greek, sorry. Developed by the Energy Web Foundation as a blockchain layer 2, complementing and interacting with EWX for on-chain finalization. VCC supports verification, automation, and auditability for sustainable mission-critical enterprise solutions. Now, here's the kicker, and you'll see why if you're really paying attention. With the upgrade, EWC transitions into an archive mode. While EWX becomes the strategic foundation for long-term use, EWT is deployed as an ERC20 representation on the Ethereum for broader access and liquidity while maintaining EWT's supply cap of 100 million. We'll circle back to that in a bit. Put it all together here in just a brief bit. So number one, you saw the whole thing of this parachain with Polkadot. Number two, you saw the whole thing of ERC20, and again, the whole thing with Ethereum. Now I see this every now and then, some people come into the comments and say, basically speaking, you know what, the whole thing of Quant being on Ethereum is ridiculous to me. But they don't realize, even in the demos, that basically speaking, Quant can change to just about anything it needs to. Because what is the definition of the overledger? It leverages all technology, okay? APIs, you name it, just about everything. Okay, I shouldn't say all, but darn near close to everything. And some of the things to consider, and that's where I really want to point out some things. So for one, you have this thing called HD account. And it's with Amazon Web Services KMS, but the interesting thing here is this key management. Okay, so AWS KMS with Overwallet's design have leveraged AWS KMS to provide similar benefits, managing multiple diverse DLT assets under the same HD account ID. I'll say it again, same HD account ID. I know some of this is Greek to you, you're brand new to this, but listen to me closely. This design bridges the gap between traditional key management and the needs of blockchain interoperability when using this. For example, and listen closely to this, it is evident that AWS KMS generates keys randomly, ensuring that each asset has a unique private key. I've used this analogy so many times. So has Channing. Give Channing a follow over at King Channing. He's your bread and butter for daily QNT content, that we feel as though QNT is like a skeleton key for blockchain DLT. Consequently, the public keys derived from these private keys are also distinct. However, all assets, it doesn't say some, it says all, are efficiently organized under an HD account, enabling authorized, which is a quant product, okay, to manage multiple assets assigned to an application identified by a client ID on what? Boom, Quant Connect. Now, this is important. Watch what it says here. You can also confirm that even when using AWS KMS, the public keys for Ethereum, Sequoia Testnet, Polygon, Amoy Testnet, Avalanche, Fuji Testnet, XDC, Apothon Testnet are in an uncompressed form. This is code for you, but it's there. So again, you have Ethereum, XDC, and Polygon, even Avalanche, and the public keys for Bitcoin, boom, XRP, and I showed that demo for you guys the other day, and Polkadot, okay, are part of that mix. And again, why is this important? It's important because you have crypto algorithms supported by Amazon Web Services and Fireblocks. Shout out to Rube Black. Him and I discovered that Fireblocks has a lot of integration for custody for things that are connected to Quant, but Quant holds that master key of Fireblocks. Why is that important? Because Quant Connect, as you see here, okay, has this connection with AWS and supports only the algorithms that you see here, but the Fireblocks supports all these other ones, making Fireblocks a more premium service, and Quant Connect currently supports EVM-based blockchains. And as you see here, you have XDC, Bitcoin, XRPL, and more importantly, you see here, for any blockchain utilizing either of these that are written in the code, overall, it can be used to generate keys and sign transactions. And again, what do you see right here? Boom, all these XDC, XRPL, even Solana's. And again, keep in mind the whole idea of what you saw specifically with what? Polkadot, as it's mentioned right there. Now, when we jump over to a little bit more documentation, what about Energy Web Token, as I promised? We see here, basically speaking, from the EWT MiCA white paper, it mentions specifically back in August 2025, Layer 1 validators approved this thing called Zurich hard fork. Well, think about that terminology. Zurich, where does that term come from? Zurich, Switzerland. This upgrade included the supply freezing of a Layer 1 and the switch from permission validator governance to open governance hosted on the blockchain. Following the Zurich hard fork, the blockchain with its NPOS consensus mechanism became the project's blockchain layer. Through this upgrade, the deployment of the token as an ERC20 on Ethereum was approved and subsequently executed in September 2025, which means that users can lock their ERC20 version of the token to receive it on the blockchain. This process is managed by the blockchain's collator, excuse me, I'm not pronouncing it right, who mint blockchain version of the token at a 1-1 ratio. All right, so a lot of mention about ERC20. And again, proof to unlock this, especially with these tokens. Now we jump back to Quant. I don't know why people would ask what is an ERC20 token, but they get really deep with this, and I do want to read this, and I will read this whole part because I don't want you guys to miss it. It says here, ERC20 is a standard for fungible tokens. And it says here, for example, swapping one pound coin with another pound coin has no effect to the user holding the initial or subsequent pound coin. ERC20, on the other hand, is an interface standard so that every token created using the ERC20 format has the same functionality. Now, I know this is a lot, but it says, what is Quant Smart Token? Quant Smart Tokens are, boom, ERC20 or ERC721 tokens expertly coded by PhD team and externally validated. That PhD team is led by Dr. Luke Riley, and they can be configured and deployed in less than 3 minutes without writing a single line of code in Quant Connect. So again, understand the difference between being deployed, so they're being made, all this stuff, and understand the difference between a real-time gross settlement system, which would have like 3 to 5 seconds of finality. So you're going from literally creating, which is minting this, having all this being done in 3 minutes without a single line of code. Do you not understand how big that is? Again, like some people are still asleep on a Quant. It says these can be deployed across multiple chains. Once deployed, you can control your token by using our function-rich smart contracts. Now, hopefully you understood what I just mentioned there, because again, this is how we tie in even things like Energy Web Token. Now, let's take you over to this, because this is big. Forbes pointed out that Shell's affiliation with Energy Web Token runs deep, as the pair have been involved since EWS beginnings, according to Brink. As one of the first affiliates of Energy Web, of course, we are delighted that the chain is live. It's a huge accomplishment which we are proud to be part of. It also means we will be able to use the chain in the production environment. And of course, EWF, the F is the foundation. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Remember at the very beginning, I mentioned ITU? Here's why. For one, circle back to this. This logo on the top left is from pp.itu.int. And like you see here, 2026, Doha 2026 in Doha, Qatar. Again, November 9th through 27th of November 2026. All right, so as we jump over to some of these key findings, you're going to see here, plain as day, this document, which is a 10-page document. It's a PowerPoint presentation. The overview of ISO TC 307 Joint Working Group 4. As we know, by definition, Gilbert Verdine created this International Standards Organization Technical Committee 307 Joint Working Group 4 is what we're going to focus on, but he created the standard. ITU highlights, of course, the Quant Network standard, which is that standard. And more importantly, was in Geneva, Switzerland back in 2023. Liaisons include many internal ISO and other SDOs, including ITU. Okay, then it highlights this guy named Julian Bringer, who we'll highlight here in a bit. And the other thing I want to point out is where you have integrators, end users, developers, and institutions highlighted in this ITU document, welcoming experts from various backgrounds. More importantly, security, privacy, identity related to blockchain and DLT. All right, so why is this important? In summary, Joint Working Group 4, like it says right here, this is just brief notes. It's significant because it ensures blockchain DLT technologies are developed with robust, globally recognized security, privacy, and identity protections. I know there's a lot of people already clicked off of this. I already know that because a lot of this it gets a little dry, but I'm telling you, if you stay the course, you'll have the answers you're looking for. This is essential for mainstream enterprise and regulatory acceptance of these transformative technologies. For the most current work, you got to go to that link. Well, when we go to that link, this is what opens up. It's the conveners. Again, this guy, Julian Bringer, he will be with ISO TC 307 to at least the end of 2027, okay? But he can be reached through the Secretariat. And again, this reference to Joint Working Group 4 for security, privacy, and identity for blockchain DLT. All right, watch this. When we get into this whole thing, he had a profile. He still does, all right? He's the CEO of Calistec. He has a PhD, and as you see here, drop it down to right here, he did work across IoT, security, digital identity, all these particular things. He basically is active in research and innovation with more than 80 scientific publications, more than 50 pending patents for both the United States and the European Union. He's an associate editor of the prestigious journal IEEE Transactions and Information Forensics, security leader of several ISO standardization projects, and they do include ISO IEC JTC1 and SC27. And here's what's interesting. He's the convener, yes, the convener of the Security, Privacy, Identity Working Groups of ISO Standardization Committee, boom, TC 307. He is as well strongly involved with digital assets custody and security tokens. And again, think about what I just shared with you with Fireblocks. Again, the Quant Connection. Now, you may feel as though that all these guys have these connections to Quant, but really they don't, because that's just ISO TC 307. You're not understanding the bigger picture. Just 2 weeks ago, Gilbert Verdine shared on LinkedIn that he's delighted to share that the Quant network has been selected for the Bank of England Synchronization Lab as part of a real-time gross settlements future roadmap. This is an important opportunity to demonstrate how we are building the next generation of financial infrastructure. Again, real-time gross settlements, that's interesting. So if that's the case, it's like, are you going to settle in things like XRP? That would make more sense. And again, if I have to show the demo again, all you need to do is go back to the other previous video, and at the end it shows it. But it's important to look at this opportunity to demonstrate how we're building the next generation of financial infrastructure. And Gilbert points out a few other key things that are very, very important. He says, we're going to solve a real problem. Corporate treasury teams today manage liquidity across multiple banks through sequential CHAPS payments, creating settlement risk and requiring significant intraday liquidity buffers. And it's inefficient. It's basically inefficient and complex. Now, let's jump back to this, because in this document, what do we have here? We have here basically what? Another real-time gross settlement system. And you see here the correspondent banks. You see, for example, also the liquidity providers, just in case you missed the definition here. And we see here those correspondent banks and liquidity providers all tapped into Ripple. And we see the global RTGS shows XRP ledger right in the middle. And more importantly, you know how he just mentioned, basically speaking, as in Gilbert Verdine, the whole thing of specifically CHAPS. Well, what do you see right here? The XRP ledger connecting, boom, with the interledger protocol right directly to CHAPS right there for who? And look at that flag. That's the United Kingdom flag. That is so important to reference that. Jumping back to what we have and why it matters to you, you see, basically speaking, with the R2 or the RT2 synchronization, we can change this. Our use case shows how quant flow enables atomic multi-bank treasury operations. All payment legs settle together or not at all. That's literally the definition of atomic settlement. No partial settlement risk, deterministic finality across multiple banks in a single action. Not multiple actions, single action. People have stated that Gilbert Verdi and the Quant network would be the orchestrators through what standards? What standard? ISO TC 307. And it says we are using PayScript. PayScript does not compete with Swift. It complements it. It's their domain-specific language for audible financial workflows integrated with real-time account data through open banking and APIs. This is programmable finance that works within existing market structures, not around them. I know I'm reading a lot, but it's important that I don't miss anything for you. We are also participating through our work with Great Britain tokenized deposits, which reflects our broader mission, building compliant interoperable infrastructure that enhances what already exists. And boom, the synchronization lab gives us controlled environment for technical validation. Let's talk about that for a brief bit. Because even with Canton, they're a network of networks. And what does Canton offer? They offer the global synchronizer. So now you see Quant referencing something that sounds very similar. And what is Quant also boasting in numerous documents and so on? That they are also a network of networks. But again, different use cases. And again, when we talk about, things like Canton, they are more focused like on privacy. They are more focused on like US treasuries, tokenized treasuries, right? So again, a little bit of apples and oranges, but again, I want to point out because there's so many people providing misinformation about the use cases, especially when I still see people say Canton is going to be the dominant one. It's not going to be XRP and all this stuff. It's not even about that. Canton is part of a different switch. We are looking forward to contributing evidence-based insights, according to Gilbert Verdi, on how synchronized settlement can operate safely alongside existing payment systems. Again, alongside. When you see those type of terminologies, it makes you think, what? Alongside is complementary, okay? This is kind of the work that matters, practical innovation that solves real problems for enterprises operating in today's financial system. Quant is not going to replace what XRP is currently doing as far as being a dominant force when it comes to specifically on-demand liquidity. But if anything, they're going to be doing what? They're going to provide synchronization settlement alongside existing payment systems. And how do we know that? Well, when we jump back to it, alongside. So basically, are you going to have a form of orchestration alongside what you see with all of this? Apparently the answer is yes. And that's also important. And by definition, do they literally give us an example? Yes, distributed ledger technology, and in particular, the XRP ledger will enable banks to settle cross-currency transactions in real time. So if you're going to do that in real time, you're going to have something alongside with that. Now are we not paying attention? Now are we not understanding how this all comes together? Maybe you don't, and that's okay. All right, we're all learning in whatever way we can, and I do appreciate you guys listening. I know this is quite the deep dive. We're going to get a little bit more into this. This is good stuff. I want to now have you jump over with me back to what you saw here. Gilbert Verdi points out this is the kind of work that matters, practical innovation that solves real problems for enterprises operating in today's financial system. And again, as you see here, delighted to announce all this. And more importantly, what I think is really interesting is when you see this part where it says Quant's participation in synchronization labs reflects its broader focus on building programmable compliant financial infrastructure. Well, at the bottom, guess who chimed in? Yeah, 2 weeks ago, Julian Bringer said congrats to Gilbert Verdi and the team. Why would somebody from ISO TC 307 give him congrats? Because he's part of the team. But in the form of what? International standards through TC 307, because last we checked, this guy, Gilbert Verdi, created it. And does the ITU highlight Gilbert Verdi in a biography profile? The answer is yes. ITU highlighted Gilbert Verdi because they point out that Gilbert Verdi is a technologist with an upbringing in business and deep background in technology and security, having over 20 years, of course, in cybersecurity. You guys get the gist, right? We don't need to get into Gilbert Verdi. You can if you want. There's him in his younger, more dapper days, right? You know? And as we jump back into it, here's ITUPP right here, 252 days away. What is it? Great question. It is a I can't even say that. Plenipotent Thierry Conference. Don't shoot me for not pronouncing that right. It is the highest policy-making body of the International Telecommunication Union. Jeez. Man, that sounds like something else, right? And what it says here is it's part of the United Nations Agency for Digital Technologies. Do you always find it interesting that we reference so many things on this channel that has something to do with the UN, whether we like the UN or not? I find it interesting. They meet every 4 years. Now that's interesting. Why every 4 years? Why is everything 4 years? Like Summer Olympics 4 years, Winter Olympics 4 years. But Olympics itself is every 2 years. But in reality, 4 years for summer, right? 4 years for winter. 4-year cycle for Bitcoin. You find this really interesting? I do. Maybe it's just a giant coincidence. But they approve strategic and financial plans. They elect the organization's 5 top officials, 48 seat council members, and 12 radio regulation board members. Listen to this. The next ITU, I'm not going to say that again. Anyway, conference, PP26, I'll just say that, is set to take place in Doha, Qatar from the 9th of November to the 27th of November, 2026. And the ITU's next conference in Qatar will set the stage, look at that, for a digital future where human-centered technology drives progress and inclusion for everyone. To me, this might very well be the smoking gun to what we're all hoping for. While what the rest of the world's, reporting on, well, if Brad Garlinghouse said there's clarity, 90% chance by April, that's what we should be paying attention to. Now, shout out to Coach JV. He didn't bring up any of this that you see here, but he's always pointing out the whole world's looking in, this direction, but there's a whole other thing going over here. This is the whole other thing going over here. Literally. And look what it says here. Qatar, the hostess, member states of the UN Specialized Agency will gather in Doha to continue guiding, the world's digital transformation. So important to share that. And if you're not aware, International Telecommunication Union, ITU, brings together 194 national governments and over 1,000 companies, organizations to advance global connectivity. But the rest of the world will focus on the World Economic Forum and how you should eat the bugs. No, these guys these are the real McCoy for what I see here. And yes, we reference the World Economic Forum, but again, you might not even know about the ITU. Let's just be honest. Do you know about the ITU? Probably not, and that's okay. So, again, there's another thing I want to point out here. I know this is quite the deep dive, and that's okay. We see here these member states, the whole thing of the world's digital transformation. This started 4 years ago. And so, if anything, we're having an update in this, right? And again, why is this important? Well, like it says here, it's going to be in Qatar again, and it's the whole thing of basically marking less than 4 years until 2030, where they will support accelerated digital uptake. Again, 2030 goals, which is crucial for achieving UN Sustainable Development Goals and ensuring that everyone's connected by the end of the decade. Okay, if that's the case, then is this why they're meeting up at the end of 2026? I think so. We also see here, basically speaking, the state of Qatar is strong ICT infrastructure that is compliant with international standards. You also have seen some meetings. I don't have it ready for you guys, but I saw one where some of these people met up with the IMF not that long ago to talk about some of these things. And again, if you really look into it, this is a huge, huge deal. All right, here's another reason why this is a huge deal. If you go to ITU, they highlight episode 2 of working together for distributed ledger technology interoperability. And you see here, basically speaking, again, this was from 6 years ago. But in this first episode, who's counting, right? You see some key people. So for one, you see Rob Dawson of Consensus. I've done a lot of research on Consensus. Like it says here, interoperability practice, Ethereum ecosystem. You even see this guy, Peter Somo-Gavari from Accenture, Hyperledger Cactus. Of course, Quant's own Gilbert Verdian, ISO TC 307, and the Steering Group 7 convener, CEO and founder of Quant. Right, and you see this guy who should get mentioned, who is Ishmael Erebos. That's funny. That guy's name is Ishmael Erebos. I had a friend, really good friend in the 8th grade with that name. Anyway, sorry. I know they just kind of went off base. Shouts to my friend that's been missing him for 30 some odd years, Ishmael Erebos, the same name. Anyway, so what's important here is INAPA. And why point out INAPA? Well, basically speaking, if you're not aware of it, INAPA is huge. And if anything, why are they a big deal? Well, you have to keep in mind that INAPA, from what I gathered, is is definitely a major, major deal. Okay, so I do want to point out a couple things that I have gathered. Okay, so there's a lot, right? There's definitely a lot here, but at the core, from what I gathered, and I'll get more into INAPA here in a bit. There's founding members of INAPA. Okay, there's so many. Accenture, some big names. You have, obviously, as you see, this is a document, by the way. This is a 3-page document. Excuse me. You see, basically speaking, Cardano's part of it, and you have Consensus as part of it. There's a lot, right? But you jump down further down, you see IOTA even listed on this, and then of course, all within like literally almost like the same breath, Quant Network, boom, right there. You have R3, okay? So Quant, like I said, you got United Kingdom, R3 got the United States, boom, Ripple Labs. That's important, okay? There's some other ones I find interesting, like SIA, okay? But again, Ripple, Quant, R3, and of course, even Cardano. The reason I want to point this out, why this is so big, is because back in 2019, Quant Network became a founding member of INAPA. And if you're not aware of it, Quant Network has been a pioneer in setting blockchain agenda for governments. So when they go to this event, for them to be a pioneer to set the agenda, are we not paying attention to Quant? Most people aren't. They're only paying attention to XRP. But what's also interesting is when you get into INAPA, because you're probably wondering, what is that all about? It is the International Association for Trusted Blockchain Application, and it's an initiative that promotes by the EU's European Blockchain Partnership. It's a collaboration of 26 European Union countries, as well as Norway, and includes the UK, France, Germany, Sweden, Netherlands, and Ireland. And basically global banks such as BBVA, Banco Santander, which we know about them, and like Ripple and so on, right, joined the initiative after the European Blockchain Roundtable that happened all the way back in 2018. Okay. Then again, it mentions that Quant Network has been a pioneer and, more importantly, like it says here, helping implement, foster mass adoption in DLT. Firstly, obviously, with the whole thing of TC307. Quant Network will also drive the facilitation of the collaboration of INAPA with TC307. So are we not paying attention to why INAPA is such a huge deal? And this last quote, I want to read, this is good too. Quant Network founder, CEO Gilbert Verdian says, "We are proud to be founding member of INAPA. We have a heritage of working in government and with governments globally to set strategy and policy to benefit society. We are looking forward to helping the EU achieve their vision to create an open and interoperable framework which unlocks the full transformational potential and harness the benefits of blockchain DLT for the business," says, and the public sector as well as society. We also look forward to growing the membership of INAPA, asking organizations to join international association to help foster adoption of blockchain technologies globally. I mean, right there, it's like when they meet up in this thing in November of this year over in Qatar, I mean, unless I'm not reading this right, it seems as though that Quant Network will lead the charge because literally they have a heritage of working with government and with governments, plural, globally to set strategy and policy. That is so important to share. And again, you have these key people that are part of ITU. You have obviously common ground because again, if I'm going to highlight this guy Ismail Airbas, right, who's co-founder of Kunfun, well, he's part of this whole thing of Spain, and he's also part of ISO TC307. Interesting. And of course, the whole thing with INAPA. That's also interesting. All right. And just in case you think INAPA is not that big of a deal, Quant highlights in their documents interoperability, standardization, collaboration, where they point out interoperable stack or interoperability stack. And you see here ISO, ITU, right? The IEEEs, the Internet Engineering Task Force, all this stuff, technical standards. And you have Quant with it all. Interoperability type, governance, business, technical. Just in case you think that ISO TC307 is not that big of a deal, ITU.INT has a document that highlights on page 8 of 22, Gilbert Verdian, and how it points out ISO TC307 blockchain in electronic distributed ledger technologies. Boom, right there, the guy with the red tie, that's Gilbert Verdian. He's the one who founded ISO TC307. And look, he's with everybody. Everybody, okay? Like, if you ever seen that movie, The Professional, Leon the Professional, right? Remember Gary Goldman's character when he's asked at the beginning of the movie? It's like, should we bring everyone? He's like, everyone or everybody. Anyway, they brought everybody to take this picture. Literally, all the working groups, all the king's horses, all the king's men, to put all this technology and smash down the walled gardens for we can have an interconnected world again. I know that's not corny, but anyway, I just did that, didn't I? Anyway. All right, so what we have here also is what? It says here in another document from Quant, many international organizations have already begun working on the technologies behind the concepts. Let's blow this up a tad. And it says here, specifically speaking, can encourage further industry dialogue. This includes the Bank of International Settlements. I almost read, you want to know something? I've been doing too much research, 16 hours a day. It's 2 weeks straight. And I saw that term of BIS, and I almost said out loud, this includes the boil it, mash it, stick it in stew. Because, all right, I'm having too much fun with this. Includes the Bank of International Settlements, the International Monetary Fund, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, and standards setting bodies such as the International Organization for Standardization, ISO, and the International Telecommunication Union, ITU, and the Internet Engineering Task Force. I mean, Quant works with all these guys. Okay? How about this? EU Blockchain Forum, Observatory Forum, an initiative of the European Commission, points out all the way back in 2018 some key things. But here's what's interesting. They highlight, of course, Gilbert Verdian. And last but not least, remember I said that we'll come back all full circle with Deloitte? Well, how do we connect ISO standards with Deloitte? Well, Smoke mentioned a while back, Deloitte report confirms ISO 222 as the foundation for global stablecoin adoption. And let's blow this up. So we see here, shaping the payments, or the future of payments. And like it says right here, trends and insights for 2026, that's important. And as we blow this up, what do we have? Disruption is reshaping the U.S. payments landscape. And at the bottom from this document, it says, at the same time, the boundaries between regulation, standards, and innovation are blurring. Let's blow this up a little bit more. Yes, are blurring, creating a more integrated payments ecosystem. The adoption of ISO 222 as a global messaging standard is ushering a new era of structure and rich data, also serves as the foundation for advanced payment rails like real-time payments and stable coins. Structured data is fueling advancements in AI. So that's important to share. And here's the other thing, and I have to read this all, okay? It's not a lot, because you guys are gonna ask about the ITU and PP26, why does it matter? This sets ITU's strategic financial direction. It delegates the approval of the union's strategic plan, financial plan, and budget priorities. This determines how ITU allocates resources to critical areas like bridging digital divides, advancing sustainable development through connectivity, and addressing emerging technologies. Elects leadership in key bodies. It elects who? Top management team, secretary, general, deputy secretary general, and directors of the 3 sectors. And here's the kicker. If you watch especially those intros, remember how we talked about, obviously, Nikola Tesla? Look what it says here. Radio communication, standardization, development. Now watch this. It's going to get better. 48 member states to serve on the ITU Council, which oversees implementation between conferences. It's going to have 12 members of the Radio Regulations Board, which manages what? Boom. Global radio frequency spectrum and satellite orbit coordination. Max, I get it now. I hope you do. Because these elections influence ITU's leadership and policy execution for years. It addresses global priorities in digital technologies and discussions which focuses on shared challenges and opportunities, and they do include another mention of this, managing the world's radio frequency spectrum and satellite orbits. My goodness. And all these guys, they're all in it together. I don't want to say they're in bed with each other, because that just, in this day and age, especially with the whole Diddy thing, nasty. I gotta be careful with that. So you see here also, developing responsible technical standards for 5G and even 6G, AI integration in networks, cybersecurity. Cybersecurity. And who has 20 plus years in that? In literally the biggest fields of it all, Gilbert Verdian. Hedera's got a key role when it comes to AI as well. They all do. Promoting inclusive digital transformation, meaningful connectivity for all, sustainable development aligned with UN SDGs, emerging issues like space, satellites, artificial intelligence, the role of ICTs in global communications. My goodness. ITU Secretary General Doreen Bogdan-Martin has described the event where, quote, ITU's global membership sets the course for humanity's shared digital future. I'm telling you guys, I'm just going to call it on this one. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I have the right to be wrong. I don't know that when people see these dates, like we saw last year, November 20th, we thought that was going to be like a flip of the switch. But in reality, there's many switches, like Brad Garlinghouse pointed out. But this one right here might very well be the real one for policy. And wasn't that the whole point moving forward? To get the regulatory policies moving forward? Is this the real flip of the switch? Again, could be. It might be one main switch. It might be just a big switch, and there's other ones, but this seems like it's at least one of them. So it says, ensuring technologies drive progress and inclusion. And watch this, potential for treaty-level challenges. It's an international treaty conference. It can amend core ITU instruments, for example, the Constitution and Convention, and adopt resolutions with bridging, or binding, I should say, or guiding effects on member states and the broader ecosystem, including private sector participants like telecom companies. Broader global impact. ITU's work underpins everyday connectivity from mobile networks and internet standards to disaster response communications and digital inclusion. Decisions at the PP26 will ripple, I think that's kind of funny. It's like, are they giving us hints right there? Ripple into international frameworks for spectrum allocation, tech governance, and efforts to connect the unconnected, especially in developing regions. For PP26 specifically hosting in Qatar for the first time in the Middle East, North African region, it highlights growing regional leadership in digital infrastructure and reaffirms commitments to inclusive, human-centered tech progress. And again, while there's a lot of crazy stuff going on as we speak with, the whole thing of U.S., Iran, and I should say Iran, and also Israel, and that whole conflict going on, then we know that we see this also in that same region for the most part, in the Middle East. And of course, there's more specific sources, press announcements, and whatnot. And maybe I could have read the short version, but I didn't want to because there was a lot that was packed into that. But PP26 isn't just a meeting. I'll say it again. It isn't just a meeting. It's where nations collectively decide how global digital infrastructure and technologies evolve to support everyone, everywhere, and increasingly connect the world. And if you're tracking potential ties to specific blockchain and DLT, which we are, well, the outcomes here could indirectly influence standards or policies in fintech, digital payments via ITU's broader work on digital inclusion and emerging technology. To me, this is where most people are not reporting on this. I haven't seen anybody really talk about this, really, hardly at all. And if there is, then follow that person. That's all I can say. Last but not least, how does it come all full circle? Boom, as you see right here. And again, let's pay more attention to this. I think this is the big thing that most people are not talking about because, again, XRP, EWT, QNT, what Nikola Tesla tried to tell us, but they covered it up. That's an outline. And if anything, if you listen to the entire outline, do me a solid, type in this key term or abbreviate it, and that is boil it, mash it, stick it in a stew. We went a little bit longer than normal, and that's okay. Thanks so much for tuning in. I think these things matter. There's a crowd of people who will sit and listen to it all, and there will be ones that just click out. I understand we only have so much time in a day, but who says that you can't hit pause and come back and watch them in increments? For me, I can't even get through most movies nowadays. I'll watch maybe 15 minutes of a 2-hour movie, and I'll watch it like, it'll take me maybe a whole week to watch one movie, right? But, I'll take a little break and watch it and so on because I can't, I got so much stuff going on. I just can't do that anymore. So everybody has to have a break once in a while, but that's how I handle it. So why not handle the research that way? But nonetheless, maybe the algorithm doesn't like that. So I am thankful for everybody who listens to these outlines the way you do. And that's all I have. Check out the links in the description for things like the Decent Wallet, BTCC, et cetera, et cetera. May the Lord Jesus bless you all. I really, truly mean that. Thank you so much for listening to my deep dive outlines. That's something that I've been doing for many years now, since basically December 13th, 2021 officially. So thanks again, everybody. I won't keep you any bit further. Have a great start of your work week. I really mean that. And we'll see you guys in the next video. Over and out. Bye-bye.
After these messages, we'll be right back. Yeah.
I have many friends that are earning every single day trading futures on BTCC. It's a simple process, and even if you don't want to learn how to trade, you could follow a trader on the site and let him do the trading for you. And again, I'm not trying to have any of you guys use your hard-earned money to lose anything. You don't know what you're doing? Don't jump into this, but there is money to be made, and don't use your nest egg for leverage trading. Use a separate portfolio. But I suggest learn how to trade. Earn you some extra money on BTCC. It's easy. You don't have to KYC, and you don't have to use a virtual private network VPN. This is a wonderful site. They've been around since 2011. Give them a shot. Also, when you earn that extra money, you can store that on your Decent wallet. The Decent wallet was not affected by the XRPL debacle, where the backdoor of many wallets was open and there was a breach. So Decent wallet was not affected by that. Decent wallet is as safe as you keep your seed phrase. It's a wonderful product, and you can get the discount by using the link. It's the only way to get the affiliate discount, and that is to use an affiliate link. So that link is popping up on the upper right side of your screen, and it is the one that you will use. You will also get free shipping. Pick you up a Decent wallet today. Secure your assets. If you don't have them stored in a wallet and sitting on an exchange, then you're at risk. So pick you one up today. Thank you.